Hi everybody, hope you're doing marvelously well. We are back. I'm in black for another FAQ Friday. So please, as ever, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed. This is the good place to leave your FAQ Friday questions. So if you have questions you'd like us to answer in the next episode, please leave them below. And of course, don't forget to check out producelikeapro.com and sign up for the email list so you get a whole bunch of free goodies. How do I know beforehand if an interface with more than 4 inputs will be too much for my computer for processing? I don't honestly believe that 4 inputs going into record. There's not many computers, unless they're super old, like 90s, that couldn't handle 4 mics or 4 inputs in record. Even my oldest computers I used, it was once I started getting into like 8, 16, 24, even on the really primitive old computers I had in the 90s. I think you'll be absolutely perfectly fine. I mean, I love the question and I love the precaution, and it's great to, ask and gain knowledge, but honestly, 4 mics in record at one time, it's very unlikely that your computer will stop. And if it does, there's probably some other reason, because a decent amount of RAM that comes with any computer of any price range now can easily record 4 tracks. Do you have any tips on how to get a really captivating and emotional vocal performance when recording yourself? Wow, I have recorded myself quite a few times. I like this question because I don't have an immediate answer. I like to work quickly when I'm recording myself in any situation, whether it be guitars, bass, drums, keys. I hate laboring the point because I find when I'm laboring it, it gets soulless and lifeless. So I think I would do 2 or 3 takes down, and then comp those, and then listen to it as a whole and find out what I was missing. It's really hard for me when I'm producing myself as a singer. I'm not a very good singer, but when I'm producing myself, to be objective. And if I did hundreds and hundreds of takes, I'd probably just end up repeating myself. And I personally find, as somebody who's not a trained singer, I do different vocal performances, different tonalities. And I think this is the same for most people, but do different vocal tonalities and performances depending on different times of day. If I get in the morning, I'm going to have a really rich tone, well, rich for me. And later on in the day, after I've been talking a while and warmed up a bit, I have a higher range. So that's also important to take into account. When you're recording vocals, expect to get the low verses in the morning. Expect a little later on in the afternoon, after you've been up for a while, to get the falsettos. But as the day goes on and you've been singing a lot, you won't have any falsetto left. But you might tire out your voice and it might get a little gritty. So maybe that bridge, when you're you want that sound. Punch in there. This is the point. It's like, give yourself a break. If you don't get it perfectly the first time, it's quite all right. Record at different times of the day. Think about those barriers. Morning, fullness of voice. Afternoon, after you've been up for a little bit of time, falsetto, your voice has opened up a bit. When your voice gets tired, maybe it's some grit. Think about different times and recording different parts at different times. But whatever you do, try to move fast, try to comp, and try to get perspective and not get too obsessed with maybe a word. You need to be able to move quick enough that you can see everything as a whole. And most of all, cut yourself some slack. We're much tougher on ourselves than we are on other people. Often when I go to see a live band these days, they are using pre-recorded audio to reinforce their sound. Have you ever mixed this type of audio? Does it require different mixing treatment compared with your usual sessions? I have supplied that audio for bands hundreds of times. And typically it's just the band specifically asking for stems from the mixes. So they might say all the keys, or just the rhythm guitars, or only the backgrounds, or just the programmed drums. And typically I just bounce it as elements of a mix. It's rare they ask for anything else. And then if they do want to turn up sections and turn them down, they do it in their playback system, whatever their DAW is. If it happens to be Pro Tools or Logic or whatever, they'll load all those stems, which are all consolidated to 0 with a click track. And then if they want to mute sections, shorten them, lengthen them, whatever it might be, they do it themselves. So I just supply to them the mixed stems, and then they take it from there. That's very, very typical. And if you're in a band and you want those kind of things, just go back to your mixer and ask for the stems, and specifically ask them for what you need. You might need separate background vocals, but you might need all the drums because you don't have a drummer, or you just might need some of the electronic elements to play along with the drummer. There's all kinds of requirements, strings, keys. All of these things are quite possible, and you can get them from your mixer. Now, please remember, they may well and probably should charge you extra, and you should charge extra if you've finished a project and somebody comes back to you asking for additional materials. And in that instance, I just charge my time. If it's an hour, if it's 2 hours, we just charge how long it took. I don't have a set price for that. Some people do. We just charge for the amount of time it takes. Hope you're enjoying this week's Fact Friday. Please, of course, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Go to Produce Like a Pro. You can sign up for the email list, get some free goodies, but most importantly, leave a bunch of comments and questions below. Let's say someone is building their home studio setup in the box rather than using a console or hybrid situation. To use multiple reference monitors, what do you recommend for a switching box to go easily from, say, a pair of Kali LP6s and a pair of Focal 65s, or even a possible much larger third pair? Honestly, if you don't have a console, a lot of the units these days, we just did the Nero by Audient, and they have a switching unit on there, so that could work. Most of the IOs have switching units. At least the Nero is the one that probably is going to do most of the things for you. However, if you do already have an interface and you just have stereo outputs, then I can firmly tell you that SwitchWitch by Proco works, and we love it. We have 4 outputs on that. All we do is come stereo out into that, and we're sending to 4 different stereo pairs of speakers. So the SwitchWitch, the Proco SwitchWitch, you can get it online, Amazon, Sweetwater, all of those companies. Everybody sells it in Europe. I'm sure you can get it through Thomann and Andertons and all the other great companies. So the Proco SwitchWitch. Otherwise, if you want an all-in-one solution, of course, the Nero is pretty darn good, the Audient. And there are others on the market. I think for years, people used the Mackie Big Knob. I do have a studio where we have one. Haven't used it in a couple of years, but I do know that was an older option. But I think the Nero is the sort of new improved thing that people are really enjoying. How did you get so familiar with all the commands and shortcuts, etc.? Can you recommend any training, videos, materials that you used in the past to get good at Pro Tools editing? I think I was just obsessed. When I first got Pro Tools, it was like the heavens had opened up. And again, it seems like whenever anybody talks about Pro Tools, let's be honest, it turns into a war of people telling everybody that Pro Tools isn't the best thing and everything else is great. And then everybody says that their DAW is great. My personal feeling on this is all DAWs are great. If you know your DAW, I said this in the first video I ever made. The first video I ever made was the best DAW is the one you know. I really strongly believe that. If you know Cubase, stay with Cubase. If I talk about Pro Tools, I'm not trying to sell you on Pro Tools, I'm telling you my experience. So if you want to have a war about Pro Tools versus any other DAW, that's fine, but just do it somewhere else. I mean, honestly, that's not what we preach. I just know Pro Tools inside out. Once again, if you know Logic, Cubase, Nuendo, Digital Performer, Ableton, FL Studio, whatever your DAW is, that is fantastic. And if you know it well, then God bless you, because that is the most important thing. But getting back to the point of the question I was asked about Pro Tools, I was just obsessional. I asked a lot of people, so I learned shortcuts. Like that. I did look at the manual briefly, but I would always ask. And I also found that there is 15 different ways of doing everything. And I found the one that I could memorize and worked for me. So for instance, you can cut and paste things lots of different ways. You can highlight it and drag it and drop it using the grabber tool if it's got a scissors on it. You can do C and V and cut and paste. The point is like there's no one way to do it. We do have a course, by the way. It's a huge course though. It's like 10, 14 hours long. It's called the Ultimate Pro Tools course. So if you are interested in that, I'll put it underneath. It is a massive course. It's with John Connolly, and John was with Avid for a long time, and he teaches the teachers. So if you really want to know and you don't mind spending the money on it, that is an incredible course that will give you every shortcut you could ever imagine, every single technique you imagine, how to mix, how to edit, you name it. But that is, like, we call it the Ultimate Pro Tools course. However, if you want to do it all for free, there's tons of stuff online. There's also the manual, and you can go to the forum. The reality is like, there are shortcuts that you can learn. And then what you really need to do is just kind of find the ones that work for you, because there is multiple ways of doing the same thing. Okay, thanks ever so much for watching. I really appreciate it. As ever, I like to say as ever, and I did as ever say it, hit subscribe. Don't forget to leave us any comments and questions below. This is the place to leave questions for Fact Friday, so please leave them here. And of course, go to Produce Like a Pro, sign up for the email list, and get a whole bunch of free goodies. And of course, you can try the 14-day free trial of the Academy. Have a marvelous time recording and mixing.